What's up, guys? Nuance, bro, and we're inside the convention center for the NRA annual meeting. And, there was lots of talk about how, people are saying guns, the NRA banned guns inside the convention center. I can tell you right now, that's absolutely not true. You can see we're clearly armed inside here, the NRA building. They're not banning anyone. What happened was on Friday, when Mike Pence and Donald Trump were speaking inside of the forum, not even inside here in the convention center, it was an exclusive area that we're not even going into. They spoke in there. That's where the Secret Service had established a perimeter and ban people from coming in and, carrying their guns. But even after that, everyone could carry in there, out here. People were still able to carry out here while that event was happening. So I just wanted to dispel that myth. So anyone in the media who's telling you otherwise, they're totally lying. What's up, guys? Nuance Bro checking in. We're here at the NRA annual meeting in Dallas, Texas. We're going to interview protesters and supporters. Let's go figure out what's going on. So why are we out here today?
We're out here because the gun culture in this country is insane, and these kids are doing what it takes to get it changed. And I just want to support that every way I can.
Sure. And what exactly are we trying to achieve today?
Well, the issue that they've identified, and I think that this is a good place to start, is to have background checks. There's a patchwork of legislation in different states, and if we can get everybody on board, and the data shows, as they were saying earlier, 97% of Americans favor, having solid background checks. Now, right now, there's too many loopholes, and especially in a state like Texas. And so, yeah, if we could just make that simple step, I'd be in favor of going a lot farther, but that'd be a good place to start.
Like how far? Like what kind of specifics are you talking about?
Well. Personally, I think that the Second Amendment is, first of all, it's grossly abused and misunderstood. But
how so?
Well, I don't think that the Supreme Court was split on this. I don't think the Second Amendment is about individuals carrying guns, for protection or just as, it's not an innate right? If you simply read the text of the Second Amendment, it's about the right to have a militia.
It says the right to have a militia?
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's not exactly what it says. I don't have the text off the top.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Shall not be infringed. There you go. And I believe that clause is essential to what it means. And I honestly think that it's outdated. I'd be okay if we got rid of it. But
it says the right of the people to keep and bear arms. Sure, it has a prefatory clause about well-regulated militias, like the context of, what things were like back then.
Well, but again, that's the context, right? And that context has been taken out of hand. And, you don't see across the world other first world nations with this kind of culture and with the idea that somehow owning a weapon that's, who's an instrument whose purpose is to kill people, that's somehow an innate right. That's just insane to me. And so, again, I may be a bit of an extremist, but I'm willing to compromise if we could just get background checks, if we can get some of these weapons and some of these magazines and stick to these laws that, with the large magazines, whose only purpose really is to kill lots of people, right? Well, and they're not supporting that, and I honestly have very little respect for people who say that it's a hobby. That's fine, but it needs to be a well-regulated hobby if that's what it is, So
as far as large capacity magazines, obviously police have them and they carry them and they use them in their, their handguns and their rifles as well.
With that as well.
So you would support banning it for, civilian police officers as well?
Yeah, the militarization of the police force in this country is another thing that's just gotten way out of hand. There are some countries where the police do not routinely carry weapons.
Is that something you would like to see here?
I would like to see it here. I'm realistic. I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime. But I just, that, again, this talk that if you have, that by bringing more weapons into a situation that somehow that's going to make people safer, that's just not even logical.
So you're carrying, I'm guessing, what, like an AR, and then you got a...
This is a black powder.
Oh, it's black powder.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And so what do you feel like you're achieving by carrying those, both of them today?
Well, right now it's just basically starting a conversation because there's so much misinformation going around about the Second Amendment that, if we can start a conversation, that's where we need to be.
Sure. What kind of misinformation?
Statistics misread. The people talking about the AR-15 being a 50 caliber that could shoot down airplanes, and
people say that.
Oh yeah, definitely. There's one guy on what was his name? From California, talking about a 30 magazine clip.
Kevin DeLeon.
Yes, DeLeon, yeah. And I mean, just ridiculous stuff out there that's believed by people that just honestly aren't informed.
And so what would you say to people who say, like, these other countries like the UK or Japan or even Australia that have much lower homicide rates than we do, and they have strict gun control laws? What would you say to those people who say, they have gun control, they're safer than here?
Why do you leave out Argentina and Venezuela and Mexico and all those other countries that have an extremely high murder rate?
They're developing countries. They're not really comparable to our standard of living.
That's not true. That's not true, because Venezuela was an extremely wealthy country until socialism took over. Now, one of the main things that any dictator does, the first thing they do is they disarm their citizens. And a disarmed citizenry is easier to push around. The reason we have the Second Amendment is to protect the First and all the rest.
You wouldn't say Venezuela is on par with the United States as far as standard of living, would you?
Not anymore.
Sure. So it wasn't like a gun control thing that caused that. It was like socialism.
No, that was just part. That was part of it, though.
Sure. But compared to these other countries, like obviously, we're trying to compare like-minded countries.
Okay, let's compare Paris. Let's say France. France has major gun control. I do seem to remember somebody getting an automatic AK-47 and walking into the Charlie Hebdo theater and killing a whole bunch of people. People using trucks and bombs and anything that they can get their hands on. Controlling the people's right to own guns is not going to control any crime.
Sure, but their overall homicide rate is still lower than ours. Like pretty much all of Europe is lower than ours.
But it always has been.
Yeah, but they also haven't had the gun culture of America.
Okay, and?
I'm just wondering, like...
Chicago, New Orleans, and D.C. out of Mexico, we don't have any kind of gun control.
Does New Orleans have strict gun control laws?
Yeah, New Orleans has strict, Chicago has strict, D.C. has strict, and that's where the most murders are. You take those out of the U.S., and we don't have anything compared to even Switzerland.
What gun controls does New Orleans have?
Same ones Chicago has.
Not true. It has basically the Louisiana gun control laws.
Right. You know what? You're absolutely right. New Orleans is probably a bad example. Chicago, though, let's talk Chicago. Let's talk D.C. New York City.
New York City's actually gotten way safer after gun control laws were passed.
Okay.
But as far as Chicago, though, for example, what they would say is they're surrounded by other states that have much looser gun control laws.
That's crap. So they're surrounded by, but it's the people who live in Chicago that are shooting each other, not the people outside of those cities. So don't start. Oh, Chicago's got people coming from out of Chicago to shoot them. No,
they're not coming to shoot. They're importing them. But for example, recently Chicago, as you might know, has implemented concealed carry laws. Like they became shall issue.
Good. Yes. Good for them.
So, but the rate
better. The more armed citizens, the less of that crap that's going to happen.
But it hasn't reduced it really though.
Yeah, give it a chance. The bad guys have to realize the good guys have got guns on them before they start paying any attention. As soon as they do.
But do you think they're murdering the good guys usually in situations, or is it mostly just kind of rival gang wars and people who aren't?
So
really...
you're saying everybody in Chicago that's gotten killed is a gang member?
No, disproportionately they usually tend to be.
So they're all gang members and they're shooting each other. That's okay.
No, disproportionately, I say.
So it's still okay that's who's shooting each other.
No, I'm saying they're probably not going to be the people who are getting killed and doing the killing are probably not the people who are going to be applying for concealed carry permits.
But they're not going to show up in our neighborhood and shoot at us now. Let them shoot each other. That's their, if that's how you want to, if that's how you're going to describe it, it's just gang members. So we should just let them kill each other.
I don't know how I said that at all.
You're saying that's disproportionate, that it's all gang members shooting each other.
Yeah, but I'm saying that's why I'm saying concealed carry wouldn't necessarily probably help that problem, would it?
If the people in those cities, including the people in those poor parts of the cities, were given the right to conceal carry, less people are going to get shot. Unless you're in a gang, and if the gangs shoot each other, there's nothing we can do about that. But the person who's not in a gang should have a right to protect themselves, period. Whether you're in Chicago, New Orleans, or Dallas.
Why do you feel like these other countries that have stricter gun control laws have such lower homicide rates in the United States?
Again, you're using statistics based on only our really worst cities, the ones that really have a problem. You take those out of the mix, and the U.S. doesn't have any worse problem than anywhere else in the world.
Well, let's take Texas as a whole. I mean, you still compare Texas as a state to, you know, other places as a country. It still has a homicide rate 2, 3, 4 times higher than the.
What country? You're saying
the UK, Germany, France, you know, all those, and Japan. Japan, it'd be even way higher. It'd be like 10 times higher than them.
I don't know.
Anything else you'd like to say to the people at home?
No, that's good. Thanks.
So why are we out here today?
Well, I'm out here because I'm a citizen who's concerned about the endless gun violence in America. I'm tired of people getting shot, and it isn't just mass shootings. People are getting shot every single day. 33,000 gun deaths in America last year.
And what are we trying to achieve specifically?
Well, I want to see better enforcement of existing regulations. I'd also like to see an amendment of the Second Amendment to make it clear that gun ownership isn't a willy-nilly kind of a thing, that it was originally intended in a time when there wasn't a standing army, there wasn't a professional army. They needed people to be able to be called up as a militia, and a well-regulated militia at that. And
well, standing armies existed, but the founders were against standing armies. They wanted the militia to be in order, like a kind of a check on the powers that be.
Yeah, I guess that's a better way to say it. I'd also like to see some regulation of certain kinds of, yeah, my poster's blowing away. Regulation of certain kinds of weapons.
Like which ones, for example?
Specifically the AR-15. It's a military-style weapon. It shouldn't be in the hands of civilians. I talked yesterday with some NRA members who told me that they own AR-15s for hunting, and they claim that the bullets are about the size of a .22. If that's the case, why are so many mass shootings using AR-15s, and why are people dying from them?
Well, do you think it's because the media kind of promotes this as like the gun of choice? Like people like Piers Morgan go on the media and they're like, the AR-15, this is the choice of, like, you know, because we've seen AR-15s more frequently used in recent years, especially as the media keeps mentioning it and making a thing about it over and over. Do you think there's kind of a correlation there between how often they mention it? And because, you know, you don't really see it with AK-47s, like rifles that are more dangerous than the AR-15, for example.
Okay. I really don't know about that. I don't watch Piers Morgan.
Yeah, he's off the air now. If you had to guess, like the AR-15, or just even like AR-15 is a rifle, right? So
yeah.
If rifles in general, what percentage of the gun murders in this country do you feel, or just murders overall, do you feel like are those are responsible for?
Those are mostly used, as I understand it, in mass shootings. There's also a question of the easy availability of handguns. We have seen also that, for instance, when we had the Brady Law, which was a ban on assault-style weapons and handguns.
No, the Brady Law was different. It dealt with more with like background checks and things like that.
Okay. My point is that the easy availability of all types of guns at the moment needs to be researched. And until we get past this terror that people are going to come and take away every gun in America, we're not going to be able to do that. We need to have some reasonable understanding that guns are a source of this public health menace, and that we need to separate out those types of guns that are going to be used for hunting and sporting purposes, and those whose only use is intended as a weapon to kill a human being.
So you support banning all guns that are intended to kill human beings?
I certainly do. I support having
it's pretty much like all handguns, and
with the exception of those that are probably used by law enforcement, but in the hands of civilian populations. Why do you need a handgun?
Well, some people would say home defense.
There are many other ways and better ways to defend your home than picking up a handgun and shooting something.
Sure, like if someone comes into your house with a gun, what would you suggest for someone to defend themselves with?
I wouldn't suggest defending at all. I'd suggest running away.
Running away from your own home.
Running away from your
But
own
what if
home.
that's not an option? Like you got multiple people, or it's a home invasion. Like maybe you have children in the house and you can't
throw things at them. You know? You can throw anything at a person who has a handgun and you can distract them. and their shot will either go wild. I happen to be on the security team at our church.
I think we need stricter gun controls. The legislators have done absolutely zero about any of the violence going on the streets, in the schools, etc. I have kids in school, and I'm concerned. It's like the nuclear arms race, only it's a new arms race. If my neighbor has an AR-15, do I have to have an AR-15 to protect myself? And why does he have an AR-15 or she have an AR-15? Is she or he, a conspiracy theorist, afraid of everything? I don't know. I've never had a gun. I've lived in, every, maybe sketchy neighborhood in Dallas. I've never needed a gun. And I don't, the more guns we have, the more violence we have. Statistically, that's the way it is.
Sure. So what statistics are you referencing specifically?
Everything. I mean, how many guns are on the street? How many guns that are found with by criminals in crimes are stolen guns from legal gun owners?
Sure, but how does that equate to more guns equals more? Do you have a specific study or reference that you're pulling this from?
Anybody can go on and find whatever statistics you want to find, but there are a number of, agencies that are non-political who have facts and figures up, and you can go and look for yourself. Of course, it's going to be whatever you believe, but I would look at the ones coming from the police, coming from,
FBI statistics and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, and it's available,
So do you feel like the states that have higher per capita gun ownership, for example, would have they would be proportional, they would have higher rates of murders, for example, on a per capita basis?
Well,
what are the safest states in the country?
I would say anywhere where you have more guns, you're going to have more gun violence, and it's just proven. I mean,
the two safest states in the entire United States are Vermont and New Hampshire, and they have probably one of the highest per capita gun ownership rates in the entire country. How does that kind of comport with this, and Maine as well? So how does that comport with this idea?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with how long they've been established, the states too. And
how so?
I don't know. The longer a state is, they have a history of, gun ownership that gets passed down, and they're small states as well.
Well, what about, even newer states like Idaho?
There are statistics like in Chicago, etc. Those guns are already there, right?
What do you mean already there?
Well, it's kind of like if you have a certain amount of, the gun violence that happens there, those guns are from somewhere, right? And it's not like you could go out and collect every gun on the street. That's understandable, So when I talk about gun control and making changes, I talk about more specifically things like, AR-15s and assault weapons and weapons of mass destruction, on the street. And you get thrown this thing about, there are more knife, wounds than gun wounds or something.
Well, no, there's probably more gun wounds, but
actually there's a study that says that, rebuffs that. But
no, it's more. There's more knife deaths than there are, let's say, long rifle deaths, like AR-15s or rifles and shotguns. Not all guns. There's more gun deaths than there are knife deaths, for example.
But if you have to go up against somebody with a knife versus somebody with a gun, what is your choice? And knives are something that we have to have. In the sense, we cook with them, we use them in our kitchens, we use them in our shops, we use them in, guns are not something that we have to have. They're not. People go, well, we're going to outlaw trucks because trucks were involved in...
Well, yeah, that's a stupid argument. But you talked about AR-15s, assault weapons. How do we define assault weapons, for example?
I think anything that, I say anything that's a semi-automatic
Semi-automatic period.
Or automatic weapon, because it can be converted into a with a bump stock or whatever, and it can become an automatic weapon. There's no defense against
So you
that.
support banning like pretty much all handguns as well?
No, not necessarily. I mean, I don't
they're
think they're ever
semi-automatic.
gonna do. Well, I mean, okay. A handgun, I don't think you're ever going to be able to do that. I don't think that's ever going to be. I think that.
But I mean, is it something you personally support?
If there were stricter gun laws that said in order for you to get this gun, you have to provide this, and this. Okay? I mean, what can you say? If you look, and you can look up your own statistics on this, of the accuracy rating of trained officers under fire.
It's like, what, 30%?
Yeah, I mean, it's minimal by, so you can imagine, a teacher in there.
Do you think that's a case for disarming officers, though, because of the low accuracy?
No, I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, you do have to.
It's better than not having.
Is going to suggest that.
So it's better than not having them armed, right? Because I mean, nothing's perfect, right? But it's kind of like it's a heuristic, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if somebody's got to have guns, you can have. Okay, if you want to. I mean, originally wasn't the Second Amendment about militias? Arming militias?
Was it?
Yeah. If you look, Anthony Scalia will tell you that.
Is that what he said?
Yeah.
He wrote the Heller decision and said the opposite.
No, I don't believe so.
The Heller decision in 2008, that's the whole reason we have the whole idea of the individual right to keep and bear arms.
I mean, you have to have an organized. I mean, it was originally intended, and he's a constitutional originalist, and he has debated that argument with appropriating that amendment to a militia.
Have you read the Heller decision?
No, I haven't read that.
It's like his landmark decision.
I'm going to go back and read that, because there was a lot of controversy about when he did rule what he ruled about.
He wrote that decision. The majority opinion, because it said disconnected from. It said that it protects an individual's right to keep and bear arms, like one of which is for example, a handgun for self-defense within the home. Such as that, and it says disconnected from service within a militia. They talked about the prefatory class
in the home, depending on and
that was an example.
If you pass,
So why are we out here today?
We're here to defend our constitutional right to bear arms.
And what are we trying to achieve?
We're just trying to, by being here, we're just trying to perhaps educate other people by showing that we're here to teach you that we have a constitutional right to bear arms, and that, we'll explain it to you, as you're here. I'm sorry, I'm just nervous, right?
So, what do you feel like are some common misunderstandings that the other side has on this?
Well, common misunderstandings are, when people say that there's assault rifles or assault weapons. Every object that you can find at your disposal is an assault weapon or assault rifle. And in the case of weapons, guns, they were made to stop, right? And when we say stop, we're meaning if you're threatened, if you have something coming at you, that's your choice if you want to use a weapon like a gun to stop it. And it's the best way to do it. And people need to stop being afraid about it. There's all sorts of laws, there's all sorts of regulations already in place in the government.
And do you support those regulations?
I do support the regulations, because of course there has to be a way where everybody is in the same plane level, right?
So do you support additional regulations like universal background checks, for example?
But those already exist.
They don't.
They do. The background checks already exist.
Not for private sellers in states like Texas, for example.
They do. They do exist.
No. I can guarantee you 100%. You can buy from a private seller without having to go through an FFL background check or FBI background check. You just do they call it PPT, private party transfer.
You're talking about people with, just a a regular owner, not a
Yeah, private sellers.
private. Okay, yeah. So private sellers, sure, they exist. That does happen, but the databases are still there. You know.
But do you support like bringing them into the fold and putting them under the background check system too? If they're trying to sell a gun to someone like on armslist.com or something, or gun broker, do you support them having to go through a background check as well?
Sure. I wouldn't be opposed to that. That makes sense because, you know, if I'm going through the process, if I go to the store, sure, everybody else should go through that same process. Of course, that's why it's there. There's a purpose to that system. So if I'm going through it, buying it through a store or whatnot, yeah, sure. If someone is selling a gun privately, they should do the same thing.
And the only way to really meaningfully enforce something like that is to have a registration system to make sure someone didn't really give the gun and they're like, oh, I don't know, I sold it, you know, through a background check, or I had this before or whatever. So the only way to meaningfully enforce that is through a registration system. Do you support that?
A registration system, I would not want to answer right now. I want to give a proper answer. I would have to.
You may want to think about it a little bit.
Sure.
Sure. Would you support a registration system?
I don't know. I mean, it kind of depends, because I know in other countries, you know, if they do have the registration, say the government wants to take everyone's guns, right? What are we supposed to do to defend ourselves? I think this whole process, you know, people are saying, we're coming for the guns, we're coming for the guns. Okay, well, what about England with the whole knife situation? I mean, every object out there can kill somebody, but me as a woman, I've been out here in Dallas. I've been to Deep Ellum. I know, I've walked to my car. There are shady people out there. What am I supposed to do to protect myself? I need some type of weapon on me. If I don't weigh that much. What am I gonna do? A man can do anything, you know? But I kind of feel like people need to understand I have the right to defend myself. I understand people are going out there, they're killing these kids. It's awful. Something needs to happen. But people also need to be looking at the FBI. Why is nobody coming for them?
So, I mean, the UK still has a much lower homicide rate, even, you know, accounting for the knife crime and murders and all that. They still have a much lower homicide rate than we do in the US by a factor of like 3, 4, 5 times. Why do you think that is?
Why do I think they have a lower rate?
Homicide rate, yes.
Homicide rate? I mean, I don't know. If you're going to try to spin it on the gun situation, what about the people who go over there? They're going in with the vans. They're killing all these people. It's the same thing. People are going to find a way to kill you.
Sure, but you can reduce like the amount of carnage, right? I mean, something like an AK versus like a car, and usually the guns do more of the damage. I mean, you look at Las Vegas, you look at the Pulse nightclub shooting, you look at Aurora, Colorado.
Why did nobody ask the guy, why are you coming in with all these bags? You know, we saw the videos that they're coming out with. Something is shady. I agree, something needs to happen. You know, I mean, kids are getting killed.
All right, guys, that's the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Support me on Patreon. Social media links are in the description box below. And thanks for tuning in for another episode of Nuance.